If you can ride this horse, I'll marry you. The words cut through the stunned silence of the arena, sharp and cold as shattered glass. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the investors lining the observation deck, the sound quickly swallowed by the cavernous space. No one is sure if they're supposed to laugh. Down on the sand-dusted floor, Cecilia Fairchild stands with her arms crossed, her posture as rigid and unyielding as the steel beams holding up the roof of her empire. Her voice, amplified by the arena's acoustics, had been pure venom wrapped in silk. It was a joke, of course, a cruel public execution of a man's dignity, designed to put an end to an embarrassing spectacle. The spectacle in question is a stallion named Nyx, a beast of pure black muscle and fury, currently rearing on his hind legs, his hooves slicing the air just feet from the head of the world's most expensive horse trainer. The trainer scrambles backward on his hands and knees, his face pale with terror. Nyx is Cecilia's $10 million failure, a genetically perfect champion who is dangerously, psychotically unbreakable. And he has just, in front of her most important clients, proven it again. The man her challenge was aimed at doesn't even flinch. He's standing a few yards away, holding a discarded push broom. Quentin Wilder, the stable hand, the janitor. The man who mucks out the stalls and disappears into the background like a ghost. He had made the mistake of stepping forward, of raising a hand and speaking a single, quiet word that had, for a shocking second, made the furious stallion pause its rampage. It was that momentary peace, that flicker of control from a man in grease-stained overalls that had pushed Cecilia over the edge. It was an insult to her system, to her technology, to the millions she'd spent on experts who were now cowering in the dirt. "Well?" Cecilia presses, her lips curling into a smirk. "You think you have some kind of magic touch? The whole world is watching." Quentin doesn't look at her. His eyes are locked on the horse. He sees what the others don't. Not a monster, but a terrified animal screaming in the only language it knows. He sees the twitch in the horse's ears, the white-rimmed fear in its eyes, the trembling in its powerful flanks. He drops the broom. The soft thud on the sand is the only sound. He takes one step toward the stallion. The professional trainer, now back on his feet, shouts a warning. "Get back! He'll kill you!" Quentin ignores him. He keeps his body relaxed, his shoulders down, making himself smaller, less of a threat. He doesn't offer a hand to be bitten. He just stands there breathing, in and out. A quiet island in a sea of panic. Nyx watches him, snorting, nostrils flared. The horse takes a stomping step forward, a challenge. Quentin doesn't retreat. He simply tilts his head, a gesture of curiosity, not aggression. From the observation deck, Cecilia watches, her smirk slowly dissolving into a frown of disbelief. This isn't supposed to be happening. The janitor is supposed to shrink back, to apologize, to be cowed by her ridicule. He is not supposed to be holding the attention of an animal that just sent a man with 3 Olympic medals scrambling for his life. "Daddy," a small voice whispers from the public stands. A little girl with wide, worried eyes clutches the railing. Elodie, Quentin's daughter. He hears her, and for the first time, his gaze flickers away from the horse, up toward her. He gives her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It's okay. Then he turns his attention back to the center of the arena, back to the challenge. He looks past the horse, his gaze finally meeting Cecilia's across the expanse of sand. He doesn't look angry. He doesn't look intimidated. He just looks tired. But his voice, when it comes, is clear and steady, carrying in the charged silence. "I accept." The chuckles from the investors die instantly. Even the horse seems to still, its ears swiveling toward the sound of his voice. Cecilia's perfectly sculpted mask of arrogance cracks. She blinks, thrown completely off balance. She had expected a groveling apology, not an agreement. She had thrown a grenade of sarcasm, expecting him to dive for cover. Instead, he'd caught it, pulled the pin himself, and handed it back to her. "Fine," she snaps, recovering quickly. Fine, you have 1 month. In 1 month, this facility hosts the Autumn Cup. You will ride him in the opening exhibition, in front of everyone. She adds the last part as a threat, a reminder of the scale of the humiliation that awaits him. Quentin gives another small nod. 1 month, he agrees. Then he does something that makes a collective gasp sweep through the onlookers. He turns his back on the stallion. He walks calmly toward the gate, not looking back, as if leaving a sleeping dog, not a raging beast. Nix, for reasons no one can understand, doesn't charge. He simply stands there, watching the strange, quiet man walk away. Quentin walks straight to his daughter, scoops her into his arms, and without another word, disappears through the exit tunnel, leaving behind a stunned silence, a terrified trainer, a confused horse, and one very shaken CEO standing in the middle of her perfectly controlled world, which had just been thrown into chaos by the last man she ever expected. The investors start murmuring, their voices a low buzz of confusion and intrigue. Cecilia's lead trainer, a man named Corgan, approaches her, his face ashen. Miss Fairchild, you can't be serious. That man is a janitor. The horse will tear him apart. Cecilia doesn't answer. She's staring at the empty space where Quentin had stood. The quiet dignity he possessed was more infuriating than any shouted insult. He hadn't played her game. He had simply changed the rules. Find out who he is, she says, her voice a low command. I want to know everything. Where he came from, who he worked for, what gives him the audacity to think he can tame the devil himself. Her assistant, a young man named Finn, nods nervously. Yes, Miss Fairchild, and get that horse back in his stall, she adds, turning her back on the arena. And double the security protocol on his enclosure. If our janitor wants to play cowboy, he's going to do it on my terms. As she strides away, the weight of her ridiculous public proclamation begins to settle on her shoulders. She, Cecilia Fairchild, a titan of the industry, had just effectively betrothed herself to a stable hand in front of the very people she needed to impress. A bitter taste fills her mouth. It doesn't matter, she tells herself. He'll fail. He'll come begging to be let out of the deal in a week, and she would have the pleasure of firing him. But as she stepped into the elevator, a flicker of doubt, cold and unwelcome, entered her mind. The image of the janitor's calm, steady eyes. The way the most violent horse she had ever seen had simply stopped. She had meant to humiliate him, to make him an example. But as the elevator doors slid shut, she couldn't shake the terrifying feeling that, in front of everyone, he had somehow, inexplicably, made an example out of her. The morning after the spectacle, the air at Fairchild Equine Dynamics is thick with whispers. Stable hands talk in hushed tones while grooming prize-winning mares. Executives in the main building sip their coffee and speculate behind frosted glass doors. The story of the CEO's bizarre wager with the janitor has already taken root, a stubborn weed in Cecilia's perfectly manicured world. Cecilia herself is in her penthouse office, a sterile space of white leather and chrome that overlooks the entire facility. She hasn't slept. On a massive screen that usually displays stock tickers and market analyses, she plays the security footage from the arena on a loop. She watches it without sound, focusing on the silent language of the scene, the explosive terror of the horse, the cowering fear of her trainer, and Quentin Wilder. She zooms in on his face. There's no arrogance, no bravado, just a profound, unsettling stillness. She watches as he turns his back on the stallion and walks away. It wasn't an act of dominance, it was an act of dismissal, as if the $10 million animal wasn't even a threat. Who was this man? Her assistant, Finn, enters the room, holding a tablet like a shield. Ms. Fairchild, the preliminary background check on Quentin Wilder is complete. And, she asks, not taking her eyes off the screen. That's just it, Finn says, his voice hesitant. There's almost nothing. He's been employed here for 2 years. Before that, a janitorial position at a warehouse in the next state. Before that, nothing. No records for a Quentin Wilder with his social security number for the prior decade. It's like he didn't exist. Cecilia finally turns, taking the tablet. She scrolls through the sparse data. No listed equestrian experience. No professional licenses. No criminal record. Just a man and his daughter, Elodie, who is enrolled in the local public school. He is a ghost. A man with no past who can calm a beast no one else can touch. The mystery deepens, and Cecilia feels a prickle of something she rarely experiences. Intrigue. Miles away, in a small two-bedroom apartment that smells of sawdust and clean laundry, Quentin Wilder sits at a small wooden table. He's stitching a tear in a small canvas backpack. Elodie sits across from him, her brow furrowed in concentration as she draws in a sketchbook. The page is filled with horses. Not the furious, rearing monster from yesterday, but graceful creatures with gentle eyes, running through fields of wildflowers. There is no sign of the man who accepted an impossible challenge. There is only a father, his movements careful and deliberate, fixing his daughter's school bag. He didn't want this. Attention is dangerous. Attention brings questions, and questions can unearth a past he has worked tirelessly to bury. He took the job here because it was quiet, because it allowed him to be near horses without being the man he used to be. It was a kind of penance, a way to live in the shadow of his old life. "Daddy," Elodie says, her voice a soft whisper. It's the first word she's spoken since yesterday. She rarely speaks to anyone but him. She pushes the sketchbook across the table. He looks down at the drawing. In the corner, next to the gentle horses, she has drawn a tall black stallion. But this one isn't angry. It's standing still, and a small stick figure, him, is standing calmly beside it. He feels a lump form in his throat. He had accepted the challenge for the horse, to stop its suffering. But looking at this drawing, he realizes he also did it for her, to show her that not all big, powerful things are meant to be feared, to show her that the monster in her memories doesn't have to be the monster in her future. The summons comes an hour later. A black car with the Fairchild logo pulls up outside their modest apartment building. Quentin is to report to the CIO's office immediately. When he enters the penthouse, the entire senior team is assembled. The trainer, Corgan, glares at him with open hostility. Finn, the assistant, won't meet his eye. And Cecilia sits behind a vast marble desk, the queen on her throne. She slides a thick, leather-bound document across the desk. "Our contract," she says, her voice devoid of any emotion. "My lawyers drew it up this morning. It outlines the terms of our arrangement. It's a power play." Another attempt to intimidate him, to put him back in the box of a lowly employee. The room is silent as he picks it up. He flips through the pages, his expression unreadable. The document is filled with legal jargon, clauses on media rights, non-disclosure agreements, liability waivers. Quentin walks over to Finn's side, plucks a pen from the assistant's trembling hand, and walks back to the desk. In front of the entire executive team, he begins to edit the multi-million-dollar legal document. He draws a firm line through the entire section on media appearances. He crosses out the clause that gives Fairchild Equine the right to analyze and replicate his training methods. Then, at the bottom of the final page, he adds a single sentence in clean block letters. All sessions with the horse Nix are to be conducted in private. No observers, no censors, no interference of any kind. He slides the document back across the desk. "These are my terms," he says quietly. Corgan, the trainer, scoffs. "That's ridiculous. How can we assess progress without observation? His methods could be dangerous." "My methods," Quentin says, his eyes meeting Corgan's for the first time, "are not your concern." Cecilia stares at the added sentence. It's a direct challenge to everything she believes in. Her entire empire is built on data, on observation, on technological analysis. He is asking her to operate on the one thing she doesn't have, faith. Her pride tells her to refuse, to tear up the contract and fire him on the spot. But the image of him in the arena flashes in her mind. The ghost with no past, The mystery. Fine, she says, the word tasting like ash. You have your privacy. She gestures for him to leave. Your first session is this afternoon. Don't be late. Later that day, Cecilia sits in her office, her promise of privacy already broken. On her screen is a live feed from a silent, high-definition security camera hidden in the rafters of Nix's new, reinforced enclosure. It's her one loophole. She would not be denied her data. The door to the paddock slides open, and Quentin walks in. He's wearing the same simple work clothes as always. Nix is at the far end of the enclosure, his body tense. As soon as he sees Quentin, his ears pin back, and he lets out a furious snort, pawing at the ground. Quentin closes the gate behind him, and then he just stands there. He doesn't approach the horse. He doesn't hold out a hand. He doesn't carry a whip or a rope or a bucket of treats. He leans against the fence, about 50 feet away from the volatile stallion, and he waits. For an hour. Nothing happens. Nix paces, snorts, and occasionally makes a mock charge, stopping short to see if the man will flinch. Quentin doesn't move. He just stands there, a quiet, immovable object. He's not training. He's not doing anything. In her office, Cecilia leans closer to the screen, her brow furrowed in a mixture of confusion and fury. What is he doing? This is a waste of time. It's an insult. This is his grand method? To do nothing? She watches as the minutes tick by, the tension on the screen a strange, silent ballet between a raging horse and a motionless man. She feels a rising tide of frustration, yet she cannot bring herself to look away. For 3 more days, the bizarre ritual continues. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Quentin Wilder enters the high-security paddock, and for 1 hour, he does absolutely nothing. He leans against the fence, his arms relaxed, his gaze soft and unfocused. He becomes a part of the landscape, as inanimate as the water trough or the fence posts. And for 3 more days, Nix puts on a show of terror. He charges the fence, churning the sand with his powerful hooves. He rears and screams, a deafening sound of rage that echoes through the stables. He is a storm of black fury, and Quentin is the silent, unmoving eye at its center. The facility is a hotbed of gossip. The other trainers and stable hands openly mock Quentin's methods. They call it the janitor's meditation, or the great stare-down. Corgan, the head trainer, is practically apoplectic. He complains to Cecilia twice a day. He's a charlatan, a fraud, Corgan insists, standing before her desk. He's making a mockery of our entire program. The Autumn Cup is less than 4 weeks away. At this rate, the only way he'll be riding that horse is in his own funeral procession. Cecilia's patience, already worn thin, finally snaps. She has watched every minute of Quentin's sessions on her hidden camera, her frustration mounting with each passing hour of inaction. She is a woman of action, of results, of data. This quiet, passive resistance is a language she doesn't understand, and it infuriates her. She finds Quentin after his session, not in the paddock, but in the main tack room. He's meticulously cleaning a set of leather bridles, his hands moving with the same quiet efficiency as they do when he's sweeping a floor. The smell of saddle soap and old leather hangs in the air. He's a janitor again, a stable hand, a man who belongs in the background. The contrast between this menial task and the godlike confidence he displayed in the arena is jarring. "What is your game, Wilder?" she demands, her voice sharp, making him look up from his work. He blinks, as if surprised to see her here, in this humble corner of her empire. "I don't play games, Miss Fairchild. Don't you?" She takes a step closer, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing exactly that. You stand in that paddock for an hour every day doing nothing. Do you really think you can tame a horse like Nix by boring him to death?" Quentin sets down the bridle and wipes his hands on a soft cloth. He looks at her, and his gaze is so direct, so devoid of fear, that she feels an involuntary need to take a step back. Nix isn't bored, he says calmly. He's learning. Learning what? How to stand still. He's learning that my presence doesn't equal pressure, Quentin explains, his voice patient, as if speaking to a child. Every other person who has ever entered his space has wanted something from him. They've carried a rope, or a whip, or a syringe. They've come with expectations, with ambition, and he has responded with violence. He's spent his entire life screaming, and no one has ever stopped to listen. Cecilia stares at him, dumbfounded. Listen? He's a horse, not a philosopher. He needs to be broken, to be taught to obey. You break a thing that's meant to be shattered, Quentin says, and there's a flicker of something hard and cold in his eyes. You can't force trust, Miss Fairchild. It has to be offered. I'm just creating a space where he feels safe enough to consider it. His words hang in the air between them, a direct assault on her entire life's philosophy. Control, dominance, willpower. These are the pillars upon which she built her world. He is telling her they are worthless. So your grand strategy is to wait, she asks, her voice laced with disbelief. You have less than 4 weeks to ride an unrideable horse, and your plan is to wait for him to offer you his trust? That's the only plan that has a chance of working, he replies. She shakes her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You're a fool. She turns and walks away, the sound of her heels a sharp, angry retreat. Quentin watches her go, then turns back to his work. His hands are steady as he picks up the bridle, but his mind is somewhere else entirely. He thinks of another rider, another horse. He thinks of his wife, Lyra. The memory comes unbidden, sharp as a spur, the roar of a rodeo crowd, the smell of dust and sweat. Lyra, laughing, her face vibrant with life, perched atop a powerful bucking bronco. She was fearless, a rider who matched a horse's fire with her own. He had been the quiet one, the one who worked with whispers and patience. They were two sides of the same coin, but the world of competitive riding, the world Cecilia embodies, had demanded more. More risk, more fire. One day a horse stumbled, a buckle snapped, and the fire went out. He closes his eyes for a moment, the old grief a familiar weight in his chest. That world of ambition and pressure had taken everything from him. It had shattered his life and silenced his daughter. He had come here to escape it, to live in the quiet shadows. And now, Cecilia Fairchild, with her cold eyes and her impossible demands, was trying to drag him right back in. He's not just taming a horse, he's fighting the ghost of the world that destroyed him. The next afternoon, Quentin enters the paddock for the 5th time. The routine is the same. He closes the gate, leans against the fence, and waits. Nix, as expected, begins his performance. He snorts, he paws, he charges the air. The rage is still there, a boiling pot of fear and aggression. But today, something is different. After 20 minutes of fury, the horse stops. He stands at the far end of the enclosure, his body drenched in sweat, his chest heaving. He is breathing hard, but the manic energy has subsided. And he looks at Quentin. He's not challenging him, he's not threatening him, he is simply watching him. His ears, which had been pinned back in anger, now flicker forward, a sign of curiosity. Who are you, and what do you want from me? The gesture seems to ask. In her office, Cecilia leans forward, her eyes glued to the monitor. She sees the change too. The subtle shift in the horse's posture, the softening of its eyes. For 4 days, she has watched a storm. Now, for the first time, she is seeing a crack in the clouds. It's a tiny, insignificant detail. But in the silent war of wills between the janitor and the beast, it feels like the first shot has just been fired. And against all logic, it wasn't the beast who fired it. A week passes, each day a mirror of the last. Quentin enters the paddock, assumes his quiet post, and waits. The change in Nix, once a subtle flicker, becomes more pronounced. The furious charges cease. The screaming fits shorten, replaced by long periods of intense, quiet observation. The horse is a puzzle, and he is slowly, cautiously examining the strange new piece that has entered his world. Quentin, sensing the shift, alters his approach. On the 8th day, he doesn't lean against the fence. He walks to the center of the paddock and slowly lowers himself to sit on the ground, cross-legged in the sand. This simple act changes the entire dynamic. He is no longer a tall, upright figure, but a small, grounded one. Nix watches this new development, his head held high, his ears working like satellites, trying to process the data. He takes a few steps forward, then stops, then a few more. For the first time, the space between them begins to shrink, not out of aggression, but out of curiosity. That evening, Elodie accompanies her father to the stables. She never goes near the paddock, the memory of thundering hooves still too raw. But she stands in the main aisle of the brightly lit barn, holding her father's hand as he prepares Nix's evening feed. The stallion is in his stall, a fortress of reinforced steel. When he sees Quentin, he makes a low sound in his throat, a nicker that is almost soft. It's a sound no one else has ever heard from him. Elodie's grip on her father's hand tightens. She looks at the magnificent, intimidating animal, and her fear is still there, a cold stone in her stomach. But now, it's mixed with something else. Wonder. While Quentin is busy with the water trough, she pulls a small, lumpy carrot from her pocket. Her hand trembles as she reaches out and places it on the edge of the stall's feed bin, a silent offering, before quickly retreating to the safety of her father's side. Quentin sees the gesture. He places a hand on her head and says nothing, but his heart swells with a hope he hasn't felt in years. In the penthouse, Cecilia is becoming an obsessive. She has canceled 3 meetings to watch the silent drama unfold on her monitor. She sees Nix's tentative steps forward. She sees the quiet bond between the father and daughter. She sees the carrot. These small human moments are pieces of a puzzle that her logical mind cannot assemble. This janitor is not just training a horse. He is performing some kind of quiet miracle, and it is happening in the one place she cannot exert her control. Her frustration with the sparse background check has festered into a need for answers. She hires a private investigator, an old-school operative who specializes in finding ghosts. "I don't care what it costs," she tells him over the phone. "Find me the past of Quentin Wilder." The corporate pressure is also mounting. Leland Blackwood, a senior board member and a relic of the old equestrian world, requests a private meeting. He sits in one of her white leather chairs, his posture stiff with disapproval. "Cecilia," he begins, his tone laced with condescension, "the board is concerned. Your little wager with a stable hand has become the talk of the circuit. It makes us look frivolous, unserious." "My little wager," Cecilia replies, her voice dangerously level, "is a calculated risk." "Is it?" Leland raises a skeptical eyebrow. "Or is it an obsession? You've poured millions into that stallion with no return. Now you're staking the company's reputation on a janitor. People are saying you've lost your touch." "Tell them," Cecilia says, leaning forward, "that I am exploring an alternative training paradigm, one that could revolutionize the industry if it succeeds. It's a lie, a corporate spin she just invented, but saying it aloud makes it feel almost true." Leland is unconvinced. "See that it does succeed," he says, rising to leave. "The Autumn Cup is a major showcase. The board will be expecting results, not folksy experiments." His warning hangs in the air long after he leaves. The pressure is coming from all sides, from her board, from her own logical mind, from the ticking clock. Everything depends on the quiet man in the paddock. 2 weeks after the challenge was issued, the moment happens. Quentin has been sitting in the center of the paddock for nearly an hour. Nix has spent the entire time on the opposite side of the enclosure, pretending to ignore him. But he's been watching. Quentin can feel the horse's gaze. Slowly, Quentin gets to his feet. He doesn't look at the horse. He brushes the sand from his pants and begins to walk, not toward the horse, but in a slow, wide circle around the paddock, his path keeping him a respectful distance away. Nix watches his every move. Quentin stops, still not looking at him. He holds his hand out, palm down, relaxed, an invitation without demand. He waits. For a full minute, nothing happens. The only sound is the wind whistling softly through the arena's rafters. Cecilia, in her office, holds her breath. Then the stallion takes a step, and another. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace she has never seen before. He closes the distance between them, his approach so quiet it's almost reverent. He stops just in front of Quentin, his massive head just inches from the outstretched hand. He is a statue of black marble and coiled power. He could kill the man with a single, violent strike. He lowers his head, his nostrils flaring as he scents the man's hand. He hesitates, the memory of a lifetime of fear and aggression warring with this new, strange feeling of peace. Then, with a softness that seems impossible for such a powerful creature, Nix extends his neck and gently, tentatively, touches his velvety nose to the center of Quentin's palm. The contact lasts only for a second, but it's a seismic event. In that single, silent touch, a barrier shatters. A treaty is signed. Watching on her screen, Cecilia feels a jolt, a genuine shock that runs through her entire body. Her hand flies to her mouth. She has seen the impossible. She has just witnessed her $10 million monster, her symbol of untamable chaos, choose to connect with another living being. And it was done not with force, not with technology, but with a quiet patience that she is beginning to realize is a power far greater than her own. The image of the horse's nose touching Quentin's palm is burned into Cecilia's mind. She replays the security footage a dozen times. She slows it down, zooms in, analyzes every minute detail. The softening of Nix's eyes, the relaxation of his ears, the way Quentin doesn't flinch, doesn't even seem to breathe. Her entire empire is built on predicting and controlling outcomes, but this was an act of pure, unpredictable grace. It is a variable she cannot account for, a piece of data that breaks her every algorithm. She feels a strange, unfamiliar ache in her chest. It's the feeling of being wrong, profoundly, fundamentally wrong. The next morning, the report from the private investigator arrives. It's a thick, leather-bound file delivered by a courier, looking more like a historical manuscript than a background check. Cecilia dismisses her assistant and locks her office door. She opens the file, and the ghost of Quentin Wilder begins to take shape. It's all there, unearthed from the dusty archives of small-town newspapers and obscure equestrian blogs. Faded, grainy photographs of a rugged, smiling young man who looks both like Quentin and nothing like him. In every photo, he is with a fiery, laughing woman with hair the color of midnight. Lyra Wilder, his wife. The articles tell a story of a legend. The Wilder Way, a family from the heart of Montana who, for generations, practiced a form of horsemanship that was more art than science. They spoke of a connection with horses that bordered on mystical. The clippings praise Quentin as the last and most gifted of his line, a prodigy who could calm the most broken spirits. He and his wife were a celebrated duo, poised to bring their gentle, revolutionary methods to the world stage. And then, the tragedy. A single stark headline from a local paper dated 6 years ago. Riding champion Lyra Wilder killed in tragic accident at National Rodeo Finals. The article is brief, describing a freak equipment failure, a fallen horse, a life extinguished in a cloud of dust. There are no more articles about Quentin Wilder after that date. He and his young daughter, Elodie, who was there that day, simply vanished. The Wilder Way, it seemed, had died with his wife. Cecilia leans back in her chair, the file resting in her lap. The quiet janitor, the man she had mocked and ridiculed, is not a ghost. He is an exile, a king in hiding, scrubbing floors in the kingdom he was born to rule. The weight of her own arrogance presses down on her. The sarcastic marriage proposal, once a tool of public humiliation, now feels like a sacrilege. She doesn't see Quentin for the rest of the day. He doesn't show up for his afternoon session with Nix, an absence that sends a ripple of alarm through Cecilia. But she understands. He is not her employee to be summoned. He is a man who operates on his own terms. She finds him that evening long after the sun has set and the stables have fallen quiet. He's not in the tack room or the stalls. He's sitting on a bale of hay in the darkened indoor arena, the same arena where she first challenged him. The only light comes from the moon, casting long shadows across the sand. Elodie is asleep on a horse blanket beside him, her sketchbook clutched in her hand. Cecilia approaches slowly, her footsteps muffled by the soft ground. He doesn't seem surprised to see her. He just continues to stare out into the empty space. He needed a day, Quentin says, his voice quiet. So did I. She stops a few feet away, the thick file from the investigator feeling heavy in her hand, even though she left it in her office. I know who you are, she says, the words feeling inadequate. He doesn't respond, just continues to watch the shadows. The wilder way, she continues, her voice softer than she intended. I read about your family, about your wife. She pauses, then adds, I'm sorry. He finally turns his head to look at her. In the dim light, she can see the deep, weary lines around his eyes. Sorry for what? For what happened? Or for what you found? The question is a quiet challenge. For my ignorance, Cecilia admits, and the honesty of the admission surprises even herself. I saw a janitor. I didn't see the man. He gives a small, tired shrug. That was the point. No one was supposed to. They sit in a fragile silence. In the distance, a horse nickers softly. It's Nix. Why here? Cecilia asks, her curiosity overriding her pride. Of all the places in the world to disappear, why come to the heart of the world you were running from? Why work for a company that represents everything you must hate? Quentin looks over at his sleeping daughter, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. After Lyra died, he begins, his voice rough with memory. The silence was the hardest part. Elodie stopped talking, and the horses were all I had left of that world, of my family, of her. I didn't want to train them. I didn't want to compete. I just needed to be near them. They're the only thing that feels honest. They don't care about your last name or how much money you have. They just care about what's in your heart. He gestures vaguely at the sprawling, state-of-the-art facility around them. So, I came to the biggest, loudest place I could find and took the quietest job I could get. Cecilia looks at this man, at the profound simplicity of his reasoning, and feels the complex steel-trap logic of her own life begin to rust and decay. She has spent years building walls, acquiring power, controlling every variable, all to protect herself from the chaos of the world. And he had protected himself by embracing the one thing she could never understand: humility. She notices Elodie's sketchbook has fallen open on the blanket. She can just make out the drawing in the moonlight. It's Nix. He is running in a field, his mane and tail flying free, and on his back, small and fearless, is a little girl with a smiling face. A new, unspoken understanding passes between them in the quiet darkness of the arena. The challenge, the contract, the sarcastic bet. It all feels like a foolish game from another lifetime. The real stakes have finally become clear. This was never about a man taming a horse. It was about a man trying to save his daughter and a woman who was just beginning to realize she might need saving herself. The morning after their conversation in the arena, a memo is sent to all senior staff at Fairchild Equine Dynamics. The language is crisp, formal, and absolute. Effective immediately, Quentin Wilder is promoted to the position of Special Training Consultant. He is to be given unrestricted access to all facilities, and his authority regarding the stallion Nix is to be considered final. All other personnel are forbidden from interacting with the horse without Mr. Wilder's direct consent. The memo sends a shockwave through the company. Corgan reads it and throws his tablet onto his desk in disgust. Leland Blackwood sees it as a declaration of war. Cecilia has not just tolerated the janitor, she has anointed him. The change in status means nothing to Quentin, but the freedom it affords him means everything. With the unspoken barrier between him and Cecilia now gone, his work with Nix accelerates. The progress is astonishing. The single touch of a hand becomes a daily ritual. Soon, Quentin is able to groom the stallion, running brushes over the horse's powerful flanks. Nix, who once tried to bite and kick anyone who came near, now stands quietly, his head lowered, a soft, rumbling sound of contentment in his chest. Quentin introduces a saddle blanket, laying it gently on the horse's back. At first, Nix trembles, his muscles coiling like snakes, the memory of past traumas rising to the surface. But Quentin just rests a calming hand on his neck, whispering to him in a low, steady voice, and the trembling subsides. He doesn't push, he doesn't force. He offers, and he waits, and day by day, the horse accepts. Elodie's healing keeps pace with the horses. She now spends every afternoon in the stables, a small, quiet shadow to her father. She has taken to reading aloud to Nix from a book of fairy tales as he stands calmly in his stall. Her voice is still a shy whisper, but it is clear and steady, growing stronger with every page. Cecilia, passing by one afternoon, hears the sound of Elodie's voice and the soft munching of the horse, and the scene is so full of gentle, impossible peace that she has to stop and lean against a wall, her heart aching with a feeling she can't name. But this peace is a fragile thing, and there are those who see it not as a miracle, but as a threat. Leland Blackwood watches from the shadows, his resentment curdling into a plan. He sees Cecilia's transformation, her softening, as a weakness that is jeopardizing the company's hard-edged reputation. He decides he has to put an end to this fairy tale. He finds a disgruntled young stable hand, a boy resentful of Quentin's sudden rise. A few $100 bills and a quiet instruction are all it takes. The instructions are simple. Remind the horse what it means to be afraid. The next morning, the peace is shattered. Quentin arrives at the stables to a scene of chaos. Nix's stall door is bent, the steel hinges groaning. The horse is inside, drenched in sweat, his eyes wild with terror. There are fresh scrapes along his sides, and a deep, raw fear has replaced the calm trust Quentin had so carefully built. When Nix sees him, he doesn't nicker a greeting. He screams and slams his body against the far wall, a panicked, desperate sound. Quentin's heart plummets. He sees weeks of patient work, of quiet trust, erased in a single night of terror. The horse won't let him near, flinching violently if he even takes a step closer. The connection is broken. The news spreads through the facility like a virus. Corgan arrives, a grim, self-satisfied look on his face. "I told you," he says to his staff, loud enough for Quentin to hear. "You can't change a beast's nature. It was only a matter of time before he snapped." This is the moment Cecilia has been unknowingly prepared for. The old Cecilia would have seen this as a failed experiment, a confirmation that nature is chaos and control is the only answer. She would have cut her losses, ended the contract, and likely put the horse down. But when she arrives at the stable, her face is a mask of cold fury. She takes in the scene, the terrified horse, the triumphant smirk on Corgan's face, and the devastating quiet grief in Quentin's eyes. She walks past Corgan as if he doesn't exist and stands before the stall. "What happened?" she asks Quentin, her voice low. "I don't know," he says, his voice hollow. "Someone, or something, undid everything. He's terrified again." "No," Cecilia says, and the certainty in her voice makes both Quentin and Corgan look at her. "He didn't just regress. Look at his eyes. This isn't aggression. This is trauma. Someone did this to him." She turns, her gaze sweeping over the assembled staff. Her eyes are like chips of ice. "This stable is now on lockdown. No one enters or leaves. I want the security logs from every camera on this property for the last 12 hours. I want every employee interviewed." She then turns back to Quentin. her expression softening almost imperceptibly. She looks at him, not as a consultant, not as a janitor, but as a partner whose work has just been desecrated. "This isn't your fault, Quentin," she says, her voice firm. "You showed me that trust is possible. Now I'm going to find out who had the nerve to destroy it." She looks from Quentin to the suffering animal. "I'm going to find out who hurt my horse." The words hang in the air, a declaration of allegiance. She and Quentin are no longer on opposite sides of a wager. They are on the same side of a war. A quiet man who heals with his hands, and a powerful woman who protects with her fire, united against a poison that has seeped into their world. Cecilia Fairchild on a hunt is a terrifying thing to behold. She turns her penthouse office into a war room, covering the glass walls with timelines and staff lists. The security footage from dozens of cameras plays on a loop on her main screen, a silent, multi-paneled ballet of the facility's daily life. Finn, her assistant, runs on coffee and fear, fetching data logs and personnel files. For 2 days, the investigation yields nothing. The footage around Nix's stall shows no unauthorized personnel, no suspicious activity. It's a clean feed, which makes it all the more suspect. "No one is that clean," Cecilia mutters, staring at the screen until her eyes burn. "Find the seams." While she wages her war of data, Quentin wages his own, much quieter battle. He pulls a hay bale up to Nix's stall and sits there from sunup to sundown. He doesn't try to enter. He doesn't try to touch the horse. He simply bears witness to his pain. He talks to him, his voice a low, continuous murmur, telling him old stories his grandfather used to tell, talking about the weather, about Elodie's drawings, about anything at all. He is rebuilding a foundation not on sand, but on the rubble of a bomb blast. It is slow, agonizing work. The horse ignores him for hours, standing trembling in the corner of his stall. But the sound of Quentin's voice is a constant, a familiar anchor in a new sea of terror. Slowly, day by day, the horse begins to turn his head toward the sound. He begins to listen. The breakthrough in the investigation comes from a junior IT technician who notices a data anomaly in the server logs. The feed from camera 12B wasn't clean, he explains to a haggard-looking Cecilia. It's a perfect 4-minute loop, replayed for over an hour late last night. Someone patched it in to create a blind spot. That's all Cecilia needs. With a timestamp of the blind spot, she cross-references every other camera on the property. And she finds him. A grainy image from a long-range camera shows Leland Blackwood, his silver hair glinting under a service light, handing a small object and an envelope to the young, disgruntled stable hand. It's circumstantial, but it's enough. She summons Leland to her office. He arrives with an air of smug concern. "Cecilia, my dear, I heard about the unfortunate setback with the stallion. Perhaps it's time to admit defeat." He stops talking when he sees the image on the screen behind her desk. It's a still frame of him and the stable hand. "Defeat is a matter of perspective, Leland," Cecilia says, her voice dangerously calm. "For example, I imagine the SEC would view a board member conspiring to manipulate a multi-million-dollar asset for personal gain as a rather significant defeat for that board member's career." Leland's face pales. "That's an outrageous accusation. That proves nothing." "Doesn't it?" Cecilia's fingers dance across her keyboard. A new image appears on the screen. Bank records, showing a large cash withdrawal from Leland's account and a corresponding deposit into the stable hands. The boy was quite forthcoming once we explained the legal definition of animal cruelty. He was afraid you'd ruin his career. He didn't realize I could do it so much more thoroughly. Leland stares at the screen, defeated. The calculating arrogance drains from his face, leaving behind the withered fear of a man who has been completely and utterly outplayed. "You're finished, Leland," Cecilia says, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. "You will tender your resignation from the board, effective immediately, citing personal reasons. You will forfeit your severance package. And if I ever hear your name associated with the equestrian world again, I will release this information to every major news outlet from here to Dubai. Am I clear? He can only nod. A broken man. He walks out of her office, his legacy in tatters. Cecilia watches him go, but she feels no triumph, only a cold, hard resolve. She has cut the cancer out. Now she has to save the patient. She finds Quentin sitting on his hay bale, his quiet vigil unbroken. The Autumn Cup is now just 9 days away. The task seems more impossible than ever. She stands beside him for a long moment, watching the still terrified horse. "It was Leland Blackwood," she says quietly. "He's gone. It won't happen again." Quentin nods, his eyes never leaving Nick's. It doesn't matter to him who did it. The trust is gone. "Is it still possible?" she asks, the question raw and vulnerable. "Can you still do it?" He is silent for a long time. "Trust is harder to rebuild than it is to build the first time," he says, his voice heavy with the weight of that truth. "I don't know." Just then, a small figure appears at the end of the barn aisle. It's Elodie, holding her fairy tale book. She walks with a purpose that surprises both of them, stopping just outside the stall, a few feet from her father. Nix, seeing her, tenses and shifts his weight nervously. Elodie doesn't seem afraid. She looks at the magnificent, wounded animal, her expression one of profound empathy. She opens her book and, in a clear, soft voice, she begins to read. It's a story about a dragon, locked in a dark cave, who had forgotten what the sun felt like. Quentin and Cecilia watch, mesmerized. As Elodie's gentle voice fills the quiet stable, something in the horse begins to change. The wild terror in his eyes softens. His ears, which were pinned back in fear, relax and then twitch forward, listening to the sound of the child's story. He takes a single, hesitant step toward the front of the stall. It's a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark in the crushing darkness. The horse hasn't forgotten everything. He remembers the child. He remembers her voice. Quentin looks from his daughter to the horse, and then he turns his gaze to Cecilia. A new fire is in his eyes, a resolve forged in the face of this new, deliberate cruelty. The despair has been replaced by a fierce determination. "We have to try," he says. The final 9 days are a blur of desperate, focused work. They become a strange, self-contained family, the three of them against the world, their lives revolving around the moods and fears of a wounded horse. Quentin is a study in relentless patience, spending every waking hour with Nix. He doesn't push him to accept a saddle or a bridle again. Instead, he starts from the beginning, re-earning every inch of trust that was stolen. He brings Nix out into the moonlit arena late at night when the facility is quiet, and simply walks with him, letting the horse reacquaint himself with the vast, open space on his own terms. Elodie is his constant companion. Her quiet, fearless presence becomes an essential part of the therapy. She reads her entire book of fairy tales to the stallion, her soft voice a constant, calming presence in the barn. She makes him clumsy crowns of wildflowers, which Quentin gently places on the stall door. Cecilia, surprisingly, becomes the guardian of their sanctuary. She cancels a $10 million deal in Dubai, delegating all her major duties to a stunned board of directors. She trades her heels for flat, sensible boots, and spends her days at the stables. She isn't there to supervise. She's there to serve. She brings them meals. She personally stands guard at the entrance to the barn, turning away curious employees and press with a glare so cold it could freeze fire. She listens to Elodie read and finds herself captivated by the simple stories of dragons and forgotten kings. She is no longer a CEO observing an experiment. She is a part of it, a willing participant in this quiet, desperate miracle. The day of the Autumn Cup arrives like a judgment. The facility is transformed, swarming with thousands of spectators, journalists, and the elite of the equestrian world. Banners snap in the wind, and the air hums with anticipation. Cecilia is back in her armor, a sharp, tailored suit, and an expression of unshakable confidence. She moves through the crowds, greeting investors and dignitaries. But her mind is 1,000 yards away, in the quiet solitude of the prep stables. She finds Quentin and Elodie in a private stall with Nix. The horse is saddled, but his posture is tense, his ears twitching at the roar of the distant crowd. Quentin is stroking his neck, his lips moving in a silent conversation. Elodie is braiding a small blue ribbon into the horse's dark mane. The scene is an island of impossible calm in the middle of a hurricane. Cecilia walks up to them, her footsteps silent on the soft hay. Quentin looks at her, and in his eyes, she sees the same quiet resolve as the day he accepted her challenge. "You don't have to do this," she says, her voice barely a whisper. The words feel foreign in her own mouth. For her entire adult life, retreat has never been an option. "We can cancel. I'll make a statement. We don't have anything to prove to them." Quentin looks from her to Elodie, then to the magnificent nervous animal beside him. A small, sad smile touches his lips. "It's not for them," he says. "It was never about them." He runs his hand along Nix's powerful neck. "It's for him, to show him that a crowd doesn't have to mean pain, that a loud noise doesn't have to mean fear." He looks at Elodie, who gives him a brave, confident nod. It's time to give his story a new ending. The moment arrives. The arena announcer's voice booms through the speakers, full of theatrical skepticism. And now, in a special exhibition, the horse that has become a legend for all the wrong reasons. Fairchild Equine's own Nix, presented by Mr. Quentin Wilder. A heavy silence falls over the crowd as Quentin leads Nix into the vast, brightly lit arena. The horse's eyes are wide, taking in the sea of faces. He shies, pulling back, his body trembling. This is the moment. The trauma is rising. Quentin stops. He pats the horse's neck, murmuring something only he can hear. Then, in a move that sends a collective gasp through the stadium, he reaches up and calmly unbuckles the leather bridle. He slides the entire apparatus, the bit and the reins, off the horse's head and lets it fall to the sand. Another gasp. He is leaving himself with no control, no way to steer or stop the volatile animal. He places his hands on the horse's withers, looks out at the stunned crowd, and in a clear, steady voice that needs no microphone, he says, "His name is Nix, and he is not a monster." Then, with a fluid grace that seems impossible, he swings himself onto the stallion's bare back. For a long, heart-stopping moment, horse and rider stand perfectly still in the center of the arena. Then Quentin shifts his weight, a subtle, silent command, and they move. It isn't a ride, it's a dance. There is no explosive display of power, no bucking, no fighting. There is only harmony. They glide across the sand, moving as a single being. A slow, graceful canter, then a powerful, soaring gallop. Quentin's hands resting gently on the horse's neck, his body moving in perfect sync with the animal beneath him. He guides the stallion with nothing but trust, a language of weight and breath and shared intention. The crowd is utterly silent, thousands of people holding a collective breath. They are witnessing something primal, something magical. This is not a man breaking a horse. This is a man who has healed a horse, and the horse is now returning the gift. In the owner's box, Cecilia stands, her hands pressed against the glass, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Her carefully constructed world of control and data has been washed away by this display of pure, unquantifiable trust. Down by the gate, Elodie watches, her face alight with a smile so bright it could outshine the stadium lights. Quentin brings Nix to a slow, gentle stop back in the center of the arena. He slides off the horse's back and, as the crowd remains wrapped in a stunned silence, he presses his forehead to the stallion's. Nix lets out a long, soft breath and leans into the touch. For a beat, there is only the sound of two hearts beating in the vast, silent space. Then, a single person begins to clap. Another joins in, and then the entire stadium erupts. It is a deafening, thunderous, standing ovation, a roar of pure, unadulterated awe. It is a sound not of victory, but of validation, a tribute to the quiet man who had listened to a scream and answered with a whisper, and in doing so had reminded them all that the wildest hearts aren't conquered, they are won. The roar of the crowd is a distant, meaningless thunder. In the center of the arena, Quentin's world has shrunk to the space between him and the horse. He murmurs a soft word of praise to Nyx, stroking the stallion's sweat-damp neck. The horse, calm and steady, leans into his touch, his trust absolute. Quentin gently takes the simple rope he'd looped around the horse's neck and begins to lead him out of the arena, away from the thunderous applause and back toward the quiet peace of the stables. He doesn't look at the crowd, doesn't acknowledge the ovation. The performance wasn't for them. Back in the hushed solitude of the barn, the air smells of hay and accomplishment. Elodie runs to him, throwing her arms around his legs. "You did it, Daddy!" she exclaims, her voice bright and full of a joy that had been absent for years. "You danced with him." Quentin lifts her into his arms, his heart feeling fuller than it has in a very long time. "He's a good dancer, isn't he?" he says, kissing the top of her head. Cecilia arrives a few minutes later. The sharp, armored CEO is gone, replaced by a woman with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes full of a soft, vulnerable light. She doesn't bring champagne or congratulations from investors. She carries a simple thermos and 3 mismatched mugs she found in the staff break room. She wordlessly pours them each a cup of hot chocolate, the sweet smell filling the quiet space. They sit together on a bale of hay. The powerful CEO, the quiet horseman, and the little girl who had found her voice again. They are a strange, unlikely family, forged in a crucible of sarcasm and trust. Nyx stands peacefully in his stall nearby, munching on a flake of alfalfa, occasionally looking over at them with soft, intelligent eyes. After a long, comfortable silence, Cecilia turns to Quentin. Her expression is serious, her gaze unwavering. "Well," she says, her voice quiet but clear, "a deal is a deal." Quentin looks at her over the rim of his mug. He sees no mockery in her eyes, only a sincere, profound respect. He finally allows himself a true smile, a warm, genuine expression that lights up his entire face. "That was never the prize, Cecilia," he says gently. He gestures with his head toward Nyx, then glances down at Elodie, who is leaning sleepily against his side. "This is the prize. Seeing him run without fear, hearing her laugh again, that's all I ever wanted." He looks back at Cecilia. "You're officially released from our contract." Cecilia lets out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. A slow, relieved smile spreads across her face. "Thank you," she says. Then she puts her mug down, her expression turning from relief to a new kind of purpose. "In that case, I have a new proposal, a real one this time." She looks from Quentin to the magnificent horse and back again. "What you did today, it wasn't just a trick, it was a philosophy. It was a testament to something this industry has forgotten. I don't want to let that fade away again." She takes a breath. "I want to create a new division of Fairchild Equine, a foundation, the Wilder Way Trust. It would be a sanctuary, a place for horses like Nyx, the ones the world has broken and thrown away. A place for healing, not breaking. I want you to run it. No more janitor uniforms, no more hiding in the shadows. I want you to teach, to heal. I'll provide the funding, the resources, the business side. You provide the soul." Quentin stares at her, stunned. She is offering him not just a job, but his life back. His legacy, a future he never thought he would have again. He looks at Elodie, and he sees the path forward, a path of light and purpose where there was once only shadow and grief. He doesn't need to say a word. The answer is in his eyes. 6 months later, the grounds of the old Blackwood Manor, which Cecilia had quietly acquired, are no longer a ruin. The crumbling estate has been transformed into the peaceful, sprawling home of the Wilder Way Trust. The sound of construction has been replaced by the soft nickering of horses and the laughter of children. Quentin, dressed in a simple shirt and jeans, stands in a green pasture, no longer a janitor, but a teacher. He is surrounded by a group of troubled teens, showing them how to approach a gentle, rescued mare with open hands and quiet hearts. His methods are becoming legendary, a quiet revolution in a world of noise. A short distance away, Elodie, now chattering away happily, leads a small Shetland pony, her fear of horses a distant memory. She is showing her new friend, a shy boy from Quentin's class, how to braid flowers into the pony's mane. Cecilia approaches, not in a suit, but in comfortable jeans and boots. She stands beside Quentin, and they watch the scene together. Her company is more successful than ever. Her new venture hailed as a visionary blend of compassion and commerce. But the hard, calculating edge in her eyes is gone, replaced by a warm, steady calm. "Leland Blackwood sent a donation last week," she says, a hint of amusement in her voice. "A rather large one. Anonymous, of course." Quentin chuckles. Even broken clocks are right twice a day. They stand in comfortable silence, watching their two worlds, once so far apart, now merged into this one beautiful reality. This was the result of the most ridiculous bet ever made. A sarcastic challenge that had, against all odds, blossomed into a second chance for them all. "You know," Cecilia says, turning to him, her expression soft, "you never did formally say no to my first proposal." Quentin looks at her, at the woman who had mocked him, challenged him, investigated him, and, ultimately, believed in him. He sees the partner who stood by him, the protector who fought for him, and the friend who shared hot chocolate with his daughter on a hay bale. He reaches out and takes her hand, his fingers lacing easily with hers. "I'm a patient man, Cecilia," he says, his eyes twinkling. "I believe in letting trust grow at its own pace." She smiles, a genuine, radiant smile that reaches her eyes. And together they stand and watch the sun set over the sanctuary they built, a testament not to a deal that was won, but to a love that was earned. And with that, the final words fade, but the story lingers on. I like to think that every story leaves behind a little bit of light to help us see our own lives more clearly. I'm curious, what's the one truth from this story that you feel you'll carry forward? And as always, it means the world to see where this story has found a home, so please feel free to share what city or country you're listening from. I believe stories are like a compass. They don't always give us the answers, but they can help us find our own way. If you believe in navigating life with a little more heart, consider subscribing. We're all fellow travelers here, sharing tales for the road ahead. Thank you for spending this hour with me. Your time is a precious thing, and choosing to spend it here is something I will never take for granted. Until the next chapter, find your light and let it shine.